Historians say Custer's defeat was sudden, but buried in forgotten account is a chilling detail that changes everything. A warrior captured and humiliated years before the battle, a man who escaped swearing vengeance. His name is Rain in the Face. He wasn't just another fighter on the field. He was the storm itself, the embodiment of everything the U.S. government had tried to crush. And when he met the men who once shackled and beat him, history says he did something so brutal, so unforgettable, that it became myth. But what if that myth was a lie designed to silence him forever? We can still hear the gunfire, feel the earth shake beneath the horses. They said the sky darkened with dust, and then the rain came. Out of it rode a man whose face was streaked with blood and storm water. They called him Rain in the Face, and to the soldiers he was death itself. But I've read his words, his own account of what drove him that day, and it wasn't madness. It was memory. It was vengeance. If you think you know who the real monster of Little Bighorn was, you might want to listen before you decide. But before we continue into history, tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe so these voices and their truths are never forgotten. The Battle of the Little Bighorn on June 25, 1876, stands as one of the greatest Native victories in American history. It pitted General George Armstrong Custer's 7th Cavalry Regiment against a vast alliance of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. Many fierce Native fighters took part in the clash, but one name rose above the rest, a warrior whose legend paints the image of an extraordinary and fearsome war leader, one who unsettled even the most hardened soldiers. In the long-told story of the Little Bighorn, two Native names dominate the pages of history: Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. Sitting Bull, the spiritual leader, served primarily as a strategist and visionary. During a Sundance ceremony before the battle, he received a vision, soldiers falling into the Lakota camp like grasshoppers, a prophecy that foretold a great Native victory. Recovering from self-inflicted wounds from the ceremony, Sitting Bull did not fight directly. Instead, he focused on inspiring warriors and organizing the encampment. Crazy Horse, meanwhile, led on the field. Native accounts universally praise his courage and brilliance, describing how his charges encircled, crushed, and annihilated Custer's forces. Yet neither Sitting Bull nor Crazy Horse was remembered as the most terrifying warrior that day. That distinction belongs to a man whose very name evoked dread among his enemies and even within his own tribe. Accounts from both Native and U.S. Army sources describe a warrior of immense strength and almost supernatural ferocity. His face, painted for war, carried a cold, fixed stare that could chill a man's heart before a weapon was even raised. To his people, he was a thundercloud rolling in from the horizon. To the U.S. Army, he was something worse, a nightmare made flesh, a man who fought with not just courage, but an unrelenting, savage hatred. Rain in the Face was born in the early 1830s near the forks of the Cheyenne River in what is now South Dakota. Rain in the Face was a Hunkpapa Lakota. He grew up in a world where courage, endurance, and skill determined a young man's worth. Like most Lakota boys, he learned to ride before he could properly walk. He was taught to stalk deer through the tall prairie grass, to sleep in silence, and to bear pain without complaint. His first bow was a toy, his second a weapon. By his teenage years, he likely undertook his vision quest, a rite of passage involving isolation, fasting, and communion with the spirit world. In those days, he bore another name, now lost to history. The name Rain in the Face came later, born from blood and storm. The story varies. Some say he earned it during a clash with a Crow war party. Others claim it came during a daring raid into enemy land. When he returned from battle, his face was streaked with lines of water and blood, some say his own, others that of his enemies, washed into rivulets by the falling rain. An elder warrior saw him and gave him the name Omagazu, Rain in the Face. Among the Lakota, names were not decoration. They carried power and identity. Once earned, they stayed for life. And for him, the name fit perfectly. From that day forward, he was no longer a boy with a bow. He was a man whose name alone would echo across the plains like thunder. By the mid-1860s, Rain in the Face had already earned a fierce reputation. He likely fought in Red Cloud's War, 1866 to 1868, joining attacks on forts such as Fort Phil Kearny, where Lakota and their allies fought to stop the Bozeman Trail's construction. Some historians believe he may have been present at the Fetterman Fight of 1866. Though his exact role remains uncertain, his presence in the Powder River region during that period makes it probable. In 1873, during the Battle of Honsinger Bluff near the Yellowstone River, Rain in the Face again crossed paths with Custer's forces. It was there he allegedly killed Dr. John Honsinger and the settler Augustus Ballerin. He was later captured for these killings by Captain Thomas Custer, George Custer's younger brother, who personally ordered his shackling at Fort Abraham Lincoln. According to Rain in the Face's own account, Tom Custer mocked and abused him, kicking and striking him while restrained, leaving him confined in the freezing cold with little more than a thin blanket. The humiliation cut deep, and he never forgot it. After a daring escape, he vanished into the plains, his thoughts consumed by vengeance. That vengeance would come 3 years later at Little Bighorn. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was the violent culmination of years of deceit and betrayal. The U.S. government, driven by manifest destiny and convinced westward expansion was a divine right, encroached deeper into native territory. Treaties were made and broken with systematic precision. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851 had promised peace, granting vast lands to the Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and others. But settlers and railroads ignored the boundaries almost immediately. A new treaty in 1868 reaffirmed Lakota rights to the Great Sioux Reservation, including the sacred Black Hills, land meant to remain theirs as long as the grass shall grow. That promise lasted until 1874, when Custer's expedition discovered gold in the Black Hills. Miners swarmed in, and instead of removing them, the government tried to purchase the land. When the Lakota refused to sell, they were declared hostile, ordered to return to reservations by January 31, 1876. Many refused and gathered near the Little Bighorn River in what became the largest native encampment ever seen on the plains. Into this vast camp rode George Armstrong Custer and his 7th Cavalry. Believing he faced only a small, disorganized group, Custer divided his 600 men into 3 columns to trap and crush the native forces. He was disastrously wrong. As his detachment approached from the east, warriors surged from the camp in force, not fleeing, but counterattacking. Custer and roughly 210 of his men were soon surrounded. Led by warriors like Crazy Horse, Two Moons, and Rain in the Face, the Lakota and Cheyenne encircled them with swift, brutal efficiency. The battle dissolved into chaos, a whirlwind of gunfire, dust, and screaming horses. The soldiers fought desperately on a ridge that would later be called Last Stand Hill. None survived. Among the many tales that spread afterward, one story stood above all, that Rain in the Face had personally killed both George and Thomas Custer, cutting out Tom's heart as vengeance for the cruelty he suffered at Fort Abraham Lincoln. Whether true or not, the tale turned Rain in the Face into a dark legend, a name whispered in fear along the frontier. Yet behind that fearsome reputation stood a more complex man. Rain in the Face did not fight for glory or bloodlust. He fought to protect his people, his homeland, and a vanishing way of life. After Little Bighorn, he and other Hunkpapa warriors withdrew toward the Powder River country, moving stealthily through the wilderness to evade capture. For years, they survived on hidden caches of food, traveling through rugged terrain under cover of darkness. But triumph soon turned to hardship. By 1877, as Crazy Horse surrendered and Sitting Bull fled to Canada, Rain in the Face remained among the few still resisting near the northern plains. In the 1880s, he finally returned to the Great Plains, living the rest of his life quietly on the Standing Rock Reservation. Though he never again took up arms, he remained a symbol of defiance for younger Lakota. To visitors and journalists, he spoke of the past, sometimes with reluctance, other times with blunt honesty. He always denied the rumor that he had mutilated Tom Custer, even as Longfellow's poem, The Revenge of Rain in the Face, immortalized the claim. He admitted fighting at Little Bighorn, but dismissed the grislier details as invention. Whether he told the truth or sought peace in his final years remains an enduring mystery. Rain in the Face's legend has endured for more than a century, the image of a fierce and formidable warrior shaped by a time of betrayal and war. By the time he died in 1905, the once feared warrior was an old man, his strength gone, his memory fading, yet his name still carrying the weight of legend. He was buried quietly at Standing Rock, among countless others who had fought and fallen to protect their world. And though his people were defeated, Rain in the Face's story remains a strange kind of victory, because his name still lives, echoing across history like distant thunder on the plains. As the years passed, the storm that was Rain in the Face finally calmed. The warrior who once struck fear into the U.S. cavalry died quietly on the plains his people no longer owned. But his legend never stopped thundering. He was called savage, monster, executioner. Yet who was truly savage in a war born of broken treaties and greed? Was his vengeance brutality or justice taking its long-delayed course? They say he fought with hatred in his heart. But maybe that hatred was not born from cruelty? Maybe it was carved there by chains, humiliation, and the memory of a people betrayed. History tried to bury him beneath myth. But Rain in the Face endures, not as the villain of Custer's last stand, but as its reckoning. So ask yourself, when the victors write the stories, who becomes the monster, the man who fought back, or the empire that forced his hand?